All he desired was a simple meal. However, the message the server slipped him alongside his bill would transform his entire perspective. No one gave him a second glance as he entered the establishment. Initially, at least, the Wednesday afternoon crawled by lazily in Fort Smith, Arkansas. Waves of heat rippled across the asphalt, while a weary quietness settled over everything like a heavy blanket. The dining establishment occupied a weathered shopping center, squeezed between a liquor shop and a payday loan office. Unremarkable, simply another venue to grab food, move through, and dismiss from memory. Yet Daniel Whitmore hadn't come merely to pass by. He entered wearing faded jeans, well-worn boots lacking fresh polish, a weathered baseball cap positioned low, and a brown leather coat that had obviously traveled countless miles. His movements carried the practiced caution that older black men develop when navigating uncertain territory, composed, understated, without any aggressive gestures. His gaze remained level, his speech measured, his bearing neutral. This wasn't born from anxiety, but from ingrained patterns, deep-rooted patterns. The youthful hostess barely lifted her eyes from her device. "Seating for one." "Correct," Daniel responded steadily. "Something secluded, if possible." The hostess guided him to a corner booth facing the front windows, table 7. It overlooked the dining area while providing a clear sightline to the kitchen entrance. Daniel settled into his seat, placing his palms flat against the surface. His attention wandered without moving his head. He remained vigilant. He lifted the menu, scanning it like a first-time visitor. But his choice was already decided. Daniel Whitmore wasn't simply a patron. He was a proprietor, the creator of what had once been a respected Southern restaurant chain, Whitmore's Chop House. Launched with a single location in Tulsa during 1996, he expanded it to 17 establishments spanning 5 states. Eventually, he stepped aside, allowing others to handle daily operations while he concentrated on logistics, partnerships, and recently, fighting to preserve his reputation. This Fort Smith branch was hemorrhaging money. Terrible online reviews, sluggish service times, constant employee turnover, financial discrepancies that made no sense. His management team offered explanations and excuses. Daniel sought something different, unvarnished truth. So he arrived personally, without warning, incognito. The restaurant operated at half capacity, subdued and weary. The servers moved as if treading on fragile ground, while kitchen personnel rarely emerged from behind the swinging doors. Then she approached his table. "Good afternoon, sir. I'm Jenna, and I'll be serving you today." Daniel raised his gaze to meet Hayes, a white woman in her late 20s, hair pulled back messily, sleeves rolled up. She appeared drained and defensive. "Afternoon," Daniel replied. "What do most people recommend here?" Jenna glanced at the menu with obvious distaste. "The ribeye remains decent. It comes with mashed potatoes and collard greens." "I'll take that," he said, setting down the menu. "Medium rare." She nodded and departed without further conversation. Daniel relaxed against his seat, slowly surveying the room once more. Near the bar stood a large man with a buzz cut, wearing a tight polo shirt as if trying too hard to project authority, arms folded, observing the staff like they were potential threats. That must be the manager. The steak arrived more quickly than anticipated. It was well prepared, cooked properly, served on a heated plate. The kitchen retained some pride, but the overall atmosphere felt wrong. Jenna returned with downcast eyes to refill his coffee. She placed his check down with a folded paper tucked inside. Daniel waited, watching her walk away with smooth, measured steps as if nothing had occurred. Then he opened the note. It wasn't a receipt. Written in blue ink were 6 words. "If you're really who I think you are, please don't leave without talking to me." Daniel blinked and reread the message. His heartbeat remained steady, his expression unchanged, but everything within him shifted. Across the room, reflected in the window, he glimpsed her, Jenna, observing him indirectly, just enough to convey her seriousness. He had come seeking answers. Now he realized he sat in the middle of something far more complex than missing funds. Whatever the situation involved, it had deep roots and wouldn't be resolved with a simple financial report. Daniel remained motionless, one hand resting on his coffee cup, the other gripping the folded note beneath the table. He avoided looking around or reacting outwardly, but the note changed everything. In 6 brief words, Jenna had confirmed 2 crucial facts. First, she knew exactly who he was. Second, something terrible was happening here, and it extended beyond poor service. Daniel had encountered this before, not in this precise form, but in spirit. Employees working in fear, managers concealing information, stories buried beneath routine operations. The difference here was that someone had actually reached out, quietly and courageously. He glanced toward the kitchen again. The large man, Bryce, if he'd heard correctly earlier, still stood near the service window, pretending to review a clipboard. But Daniel could tell Bryce was watching. Not just the food, but the people, controlling the space through silence and intimidation. The kind of supervisor who preferred fear over respect. Daniel rose slowly, left several bills on the table, and walked toward the entrance with his check in hand. The hostess barely acknowledged him again. "Have a pleasant evening, sir," she mumbled. Daniel didn't respond. Instead of heading directly outside, he turned down the narrow corridor marked "Employees Only" or "Restrooms." He didn't move quickly, just casually enough to avoid suspicion. Behind him, he heard Bryce's voice, flat and suspicious. "Sir, restrooms are on the other side." Daniel paused and turned slightly. "Looking for the manager?" "That would be me," Bryce replied, his tone sharper now but still coated with customer service politeness. Daniel studied him. "You available to talk?" Bryce raised an eyebrow. "Regarding what?" "Just a word with my server." Bryce stepped closer, arms now crossed. "You have a complaint. You bring it to me. You don't pull my staff off the floor. That's not how this operates." Daniel looked him directly in the face, voice remaining calm. "Then I suppose you'll need to adjust to it operating differently." A lengthy pause followed. Bryce studied him, perhaps trying to identify him, maybe realizing he wasn't just another customer. But Daniel didn't waver. Finally, Bryce scoffed. "She's probably in the back finishing her tasks." Daniel turned without another word and headed for the rear hallway. He found Jenna carrying a crate of citrus fruit. She stopped upon seeing him, eyes widening slightly, not with surprise, but with fear and urgency. "What are you doing back here?" she asked under her breath. "Received your note," Daniel said. "Now speak." Jenna looked around, then pulled him toward the storage closet at the hallway's end. The small space reeked of cleaning chemicals and burnt oil. She closed the door behind them and took a breath. "I wasn't certain if you'd read it or if you'd still be here. You mentioned something wasn't right." Jenna rubbed her face, looking exhausted, the kind of tiredness that sleep couldn't cure. "Bryce isn't just unpleasant. He's threatening. Food deliveries vanish. Liquor inventory doesn't match records. Cash registers are consistently short, but only during nights he closes. He reduces scheduled hours, then clocks people out early in the system, so payroll doesn't detect the discrepancy." Daniel raised an eyebrow. "And no one has reported anything." "They are terrified," Jenna said. "We all are. If you speak up, he either writes you up for fabricated reasons or simply removes your shift from the schedule. One server caught him pocketing cash from the bar register. She was gone by the weekend." Daniel absorbed this information slowly, maintaining his neutral expression. "Why tell me? I worked at your Bentonville location 6 years ago. You visited for the opening. You probably don't recall, but you gave me a $100 tip just for checking on a customer who was choking. You said I showed initiative." Daniel blinked slowly. "I remember that. I saw your face today. I didn't expect you'd return. Not like this." Daniel nodded once. "I needed to witness it firsthand." "Well," Jenna said, "you're witnessing it." He studied her, not with suspicion, but with a quiet respect. The way a man who's been overlooked, underestimated, and dismissed learns to recognize someone else who's experienced the same treatment. "All right," he said finally. "I'm returning tomorrow, but I won't be coming back as a stranger." Jenna swallowed, then glanced at the door. "Then you should exit through the side entrance. Bryce's camera is monitoring the front." Daniel slipped the note back into his pocket. "Will you be all right? I've survived this long." Daniel didn't smile, but he nodded as he walked out the back door, knowing one thing for certain. He wasn't just dealing with poor management. He was dealing with corruption, and corruption had to be eliminated. Daniel didn't return home. He checked into an inexpensive motel 10 minutes away. Fluorescent lighting, peeling paint, front desk behind protective glass. One of those places that didn't ask questions and offered little more than a bed and four walls. The room smelled faintly of cigarettes and bleach, but he didn't mind. He'd stayed in worse conditions. He sat on the bed's edge, the crumpled note from Jenna still in his jacket pocket. Her words echoed in his mind. Threats, people disappearing from schedules. He'd always prided himself on creating workplaces people wanted to be part of, especially for folks who were often overlooked or relegated to the background. Kitchen staff, single mothers, high school students, retired veterans, those society didn't treat as valuable assets. He didn't operate perfect restaurants, but he ran equitable ones. This situation wasn't equitable. At 10:17 p.m., his phone buzzed. Unknown number. Just a text. Side lot by the dumpster. 11 p.m. Come alone. No signature, no elaboration, just instructions. Daniel didn't hesitate. By 10:58, he was there, leaning against the brick wall behind the restaurant, watching shadows move under the flickering security light. He kept his hands in his jacket pockets, appearing like any other evening, but his mind was sharp. At 11:03, the back door opened quietly. Jenna slipped out, hoodie pulled up, moving quickly but silently. She glanced around as if being followed. "Thanks for coming," she whispered. "I said I would," Daniel replied. "Did anyone see you?" "No." She motioned toward the alley. "Let's walk." They moved together in silence until reaching the far side of the lot. A freezer fan hummed in the background. Jenna finally turned to face him. "I had to be sure you were serious," she said. "Most people would have just discarded that note." "I'm not most people." "I'm beginning to understand that," she replied. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small silver key, handing it to him wrapped in a paper napkin. "That opens his locker in the back room. Black duffel bag. He keeps a second phone in there. A burner. I've seen him use it when he thinks no one's looking." Daniel's eyebrows lifted slightly. "You've been observing him." "Someone had to." "You realize this could jeopardize your job." Jenna scoffed. "My job was already at risk the moment I started asking questions. But I can't keep watching him mistreat people, cutting hours, stealing cash, firing good staff just for not kissing his ass." Daniel nodded slowly. "You're courageous." Jenna shook her head. "I'm exhausted." He understood that sentiment too well. The kind of exhaustion that settles deep in your bones. The kind black folks know when they've had to prove themselves 3 times over just to enter a room and then stay quiet once they're there. He wasn't about to let her bear that burden alone. "I'll go in tomorrow," he said. "Look around. If what you're saying proves true, I'll handle it." Jenna hesitated. "Bryce doesn't play fair. Neither does Glenn." "Glenn?" Daniel asked. "You mean the regional manager?" She nodded. "He hired Bryce. Visits once a month. They talk like they're sharing secrets." Daniel's jaw tightened. Glenn had been with him for years. Trusted, quiet, never flashy. But Daniel had stepped back recently, and Glenn had assumed more control than he probably should have. "I appreciate you telling me," Daniel said. "I'm just trying to give you the complete picture," she replied. He started to walk away, then turned back. "Jenna," he said, "if you receive pushback for talking to me, you tell them exactly who I am." "And who's that?" "The man who built this place." He walked into the darkness, his boots echoing off the pavement. In his pocket, the key pressed against his leg like a weight, proof that someone inside still believed the truth was worth the risk. Tomorrow, he wouldn't be a stranger anymore, and neither would the lies hiding behind that kitchen door. The following morning, Daniel didn't drive home. He put on the same jacket, same jeans, same scuffed boots. He didn't want to appear like a boss. Not yet. That image gave people permission to perform. What he needed was authenticity. He walked through the restaurant's front doors just before lunch rush. The same hostess was working, earbuds barely concealed, tapping at a cracked tablet. "You again?" the hostess asked without looking up. Daniel nodded. "One of those weeks." The kid waved him toward a booth without further comment. Daniel sat down, but he wasn't hungry, not for food. He scanned the room. Staff moved more quickly today. Tension still hung in the air like kitchen steam, but something had shifted. Jenna moved differently, not relaxed, but less burdened, still watching her back, though he caught her eye as she passed. No words, just a slight nod. Then Bryce emerged from the back, polo shirt stretched across his stomach, clipboard in hand, pretending to check something, but his eyes locked directly on Daniel. He approached the booth slowly, that fake manager's smile barely maintained. "Back again," he said. "Didn't think you'd become a regular." Daniel leaned back. "Food was good. Thought I'd see if it remained consistent." Bryce chuckled, but it was tight, forced. "Well, if you have any feedback, let me know. I have a reputation for maintaining tight operations." Daniel's gaze didn't waver. "I can tell." Bryce lingered momentarily, then walked off, but Daniel knew. He felt it. Bryce sensed something was off, the kind of tension that builds when someone's about to lose a control they thought they owned. Daniel finished his meal in silence, left cash on the table, walked out the front door, then circled around to the back alley. Jenna had done her part. The mop bucket was propping open the side door again. He slipped in soundlessly. The hallway was empty. In the back, the staff locker room was quiet, just a low hum of an overworked soda machine and the buzz of a flickering light overhead. He found Bryce's locker, tall, dented, labeled BL. The small silver key slid in and turned with a soft click. Inside sat a black duffel bag. Daniel unzipped it and found gym clothes, cologne, and tucked in the side pocket a burner phone. No case, no passcode protection. Daniel scrolled through it, a list of contacts saved under initials, GT, LM, HQ, WED. He photographed every screen, every message. Then he pulled open the bag's side pocket and found something heavier, cash rolled tight with rubber bands. Small denominations, no labels. It looked like someone had been stashing register money off the books. Daniel zipped it back and stepped into the manager's office next door. Same sour smell of old takeout and stress. He opened the second drawer. Jenna's tip had been accurate, and found a small black letter ledger. A name written inside the cover, Langley's Daily Book. He opened it. Pages of handwritten notes, inventory logs that didn't match invoices, alcohol entries with missing quantities, staff tips rounded down, hours scratched out and rewritten. He had his evidence, but before he could slide it into his jacket, the door creaked open. Bryce stood there, arms crossed. "No smile now. You think you're clever," he said. Daniel remained still. "I should have known by the way you walked in here," Bryce continued. "You didn't look scared enough to be just some customer." Daniel looked him directly in the eye. "You talk a lot for someone with dirty hands." Bryce stepped inside, closing the door behind him. "You break into my locker, my office. You think you're walking out of here like nothing happened." Daniel stayed calm, still holding the ledger at his side. "I'm not walking out as a customer, Bryce. I'm walking out as a man whose name is on the lease, the man who owns this place." Bryce blinked, caught off guard. Daniel stepped forward, voice low and measured. "You've been stealing, intimidating people, covering your tracks like an amateur. But here's the thing, no matter how quiet you kept it, documentation never lies." Bryce's jaw tightened, his fists clenched, but he didn't move. "You calling security?" Daniel asked. "The police? Go ahead. Let's all compare notes." A long silence. Then Bryce laughed, bitter and tired. "You think this ends with me? You think I did all this alone?" Daniel squinted slightly. "Glenn." Bryce nodded once. "You don't want to know how deep this goes." "I already do." Daniel walked past him, ledger tucked into his jacket. No fear, no hurry, because now he had more than just suspicion. He had evidence. And once you have evidence, cover-ups always begin to crumble. The phone rang the next morning. Just after 9 a.m., Daniel was back at the motel, sitting at the chip desk, sorting through photos of Bryce's burner phone and the pages he'd scanned from the black ledger. He wasn't tired. He was focused. The kind of focus you get when you realize people you trusted have been quietly dismantling everything you built. Caller ID showed a local Arkansas number. No name. He answered without greeting. "Dan, it's Glenn Tate." Daniel didn't speak. He let the silence hang. I heard you've been investigating Fort Smith, Glenn continued, his voice slick with forced calm. Didn't think we'd need to have this conversation, but here we are. Daniel leaned back in the chair, eyes fixed on the photos on the table. You should have called sooner. I didn't realize it was that serious. Daniel chuckled once. Sharp. No, you just didn't want to realize it. There was a pause on the line. Look, Glenn said, dropping the smooth tone slightly. Bryce was never refined, but we needed results to stabilize. He was delivering. You mean he was stealing? I didn't know about that aspect. Don't lie to me, Glenn. Not now. Silence. Daniel's voice stayed steady. You don't hire someone like Bryce without knowing what he's willing to do. You brought him in to handle the dirty work while you kept your hands clean. Glenn tried to pivot. Dan, come on. We have history. You know how challenging the market's been. Stores are closing everywhere. Labor costs are high. People don't stay. You step back and suddenly all the pressure's on me. I had to make decisions. Decisions that got people robbed of hours, tips, peace of mind. You're making this personal. Daniel sat forward. It is personal. I built this company to give people opportunities, people like me who got overlooked. And now I have staff afraid to ask for breaks because they don't know who's watching. Glenn's voice hardened. Look, I don't want this to get messy. I'm trying to keep us clean here. Daniel almost laughed. Clean? You have cash-changing hands, backroom deals with liquor representatives, forged logs, and a burner phone full of evidence. You're not clean, you're just quiet. Another pause. What do you want? Glenn finally asked. Daniel didn't hesitate. I want you gone. Glenn scoffed. You can't make that decision. You're semi-retired. I'm still the founder. My name's still on every legal document. You think the board won't listen when they see how extensive this mess is? You go public with this, we all lose, Glenn snapped. The company's reputation, your reputation, it'll damage everyone. Daniel stood, phone still pressed to his ear. Then I guess you should have considered that before you sold us all out. He ended the call. Didn't say goodbye. Didn't need to. By 2 p.m., Alicia knocks at everything she needed. Scanned documents, screenshot evidence, audio notes, and the burner phone Daniel had dropped off that morning. This is sufficient, she said plainly. They'll surrender. Good. But Dan, if you proceed fully with this, you're not just terminating one person. You're dismantling your old structure. Are you prepared for that? Daniel looked her directly in the eye. I don't want that old structure anymore. That night, Daniel walked into the Fort Smith restaurant at closing time. No jacket, no disguise, just himself. Staff glanced up, confused but not scared. Not anymore. Jenna came out from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a towel. You okay? She asked. Daniel nodded. Meeting time. They all gathered in the dining room. Servers, line cooks, dishwashers, even the teenage hostess appeared. Daniel stood at the front, quiet initially. You all deserve better, he finally said, and I should have arrived sooner. No one spoke. They just listened. Bryce is gone. Glenn's next. And anyone else who's been stealing or covering for them, you have one chance to leave voluntarily. Tomorrow morning, I start rebuilding, and I'm doing it with people who care. He looked across the room at faces that were exhausted and cautious, but listening. Jenna stood up, Daniel added, looking at her. She had everything to lose and still told the truth. That's the kind of leadership I believe in. He turned back toward the kitchen. This place isn't broken. It was just in the wrong hands. Now we reclaim it. No applause, no cheering, but heads nodded, shoulders relaxed, and for the first time in months, people exhaled without fear. Daniel hadn't just exposed the problem. He declared war on it. But what he didn't know was that Glenn had one final move, and it was coming faster than anyone expected. 2 days later, Daniel received a manila envelope stamped with a corporate return address and urgent legal enclosure printed across the front. He was sitting in a motel lobby, drinking weak coffee from a styrofoam cup and reviewing vendor invoices. The envelope was thick, the kind you could sense trouble through. Inside was a cease and desist letter from a company's legal department, accusations of defamation, unauthorized entry into private property, interference with regional operations, all signed off by Glenn's name at the bottom. Daniel didn't flinch. He'd seen tactics like this before, paper threats from people who thought silence could be purchased with intimidation. But that playbook didn't work on him. Not now. Not after what he'd witnessed. He picked up his phone and called Alicia. "He's trying to frighten me," he said, voice even. "Then you're getting close," Alicia replied. "Let him file. That's not a fight he's prepared for." Daniel sat back in his chair, staring out the motel window. He didn't want to fight. He wanted accountability and genuine respect for the people keeping these places alive day after day. So he went back, not to corporate, not to Tulsa, but back to Fort Smith, back to his people. That evening, the restaurant was winding down. Tables were clearing, receipts printing, the kitchen's last fryer cycle hissing into silence. Daniel walked in through the side door, no hat, no disguise. Just the same man who started this chain from scratch and was now here to rescue it from the corruption within. He found Jenna in the back, rinsing lemon wedges in a giant plastic tub. "You available for 5 minutes?" he asked. She dried her hands, looked over her shoulder, and followed him to the office. He dropped the envelope on the desk. "Glenn's trying to bury me," he said. Jenna picked it up and read the first page, her lips tightening. "You think it'll work?" Daniel shook his head. "It's a smoke screen, but I'm tired of playing defense." She folded the letter carefully, setting it aside. "So what do we do?" Daniel looked her straight in the eye. "We tell the truth." She frowned slightly. "To whom?" "To everyone." The next day, Daniel and Jenna met with a local reporter named Ken Holland, a worn notebook guy with a 6-year-old laptop and a reputation for writing what powerful people didn't want published. They met at a diner across town. Ken ordered sweet tea and started scribbling before Daniel even spoke. Jenna did most of the talking, telling him about the hours stolen from time cards, the threats, the missing inventory, the fear. But she also told him about something else. The silence, the way everyone looked down when Bryce walked in, the way people stopped believing anything would change. And then what happened? Ken asked. Jenna glanced at Daniel. He walked in. Ken looked over his glasses at Daniel. "You were undercover." "I wasn't hiding," Daniel said. "I was observing." Ken chuckled. "Same thing if you ask corporate." Daniel leaned forward. "Here's what I care about," he said. "Not just fixing this place, but showing people that leadership means showing up, especially when things go wrong." Ken nodded, scribbling. 2 hours later, they had a story. By the end of the weekend, it was everywhere. Undercover owner uncovers theft, abuse at local steakhouse. Whistleblower Waitress helped expose it all. The article blew the lid off everything. Staff from other branches emailed Daniel directly, some apologizing, others saying thank you. A few shared stories from years past, other locations, other managers, same playbook. Daniel answered every message. Not because he had to, but because he knew silence was part of how all this started. And now it had to end. The next Monday, Jenna walked into the office before her shift and found an envelope with her name on it. Inside was an offer letter, full-time, benefits, salary, title, general manager, Fort Smith location. Jenna blinked. She read it 3 times. When she looked up, Daniel was already in the doorway, watching. "Are you serious?" she asked. He nodded. "You earned it." "I don't know if I can." "You already have." She held the letter like it might disintegrate in her hands. "No one's ever supported me like this," she said. Daniel smiled faintly. "You supported yourself. I just made sure it counted." That Friday, Jenna led her first full staff meeting. Quick huddle before opening. No speeches, just straight talk. What was working? What needed fixing? Who needed help? Daniel stood quietly in the back, just listening. No one was afraid anymore. But as the staff began healing and leadership shifted into the hands of those who deserved it, Daniel faced one final decision, one that would define whether his legacy ended here or just started over. The letter came with no threats this time, just an email from the CEO's office. Subject line, requesting meeting in person. Daniel agreed, but on his terms. No boardroom, no office tower, no suits. They met inside the Fort Smith restaurant on a Sunday afternoon, closed for cleaning, but Daniel made sure every staff member still got paid for the full day. He sat at table 7, where it all started. No hat, no disguise, just himself. The CEO walked in alone, tall, mid-50s, polished but uncertain, like he knew the ground he was walking on didn't belong to him anymore. "Mr. Whitmore," he said, extending a hand. Daniel shook it, firm but brief. "You had quite a week," the CEO said, taking a seat across from him. "No," Daniel replied. "We'd had quite a decade. I'm just the one cleaning it up." The CEO nodded slowly. "We read the article. We saw the documentation. Glenn's been terminated. Legal is working on vendor audits now. Internal policies are being rewritten." Daniel didn't smile. "Good. We'd like to bring you back informally, not full-time, but a seat at the table. Guidance, oversight. You're still the face of this brand, whether you like it or not." Daniel leaned forward, elbows on the table. "Then you start by showing up for the people you ignored." The CEO blinked. "I want back pay for the workers who had their hours cut. I want anonymous reporting line for every location. I want health benefits extended to hourly staff starting here. And I want written policy changes in every kitchen by next month." The CEO hesitated. "That's an extensive list." Daniel didn't flinch. "I've spent my whole life being told what's too extensive. I'm not interested in limitations anymore." There was a long pause. Then the CEO slowly nodded. "You'll have it. All of it." Daniel extended his hand. This time, they shook for real. Later that evening, he walked back into the kitchen. Jenna was wiping down the counter. The place smelled like bleach and fresh bread. He handed her an envelope. She opened it slowly. Inside was a $2,000 bonus and a note with just 5 words, "For the day you spoke up." Jenna looked up, blinking back emotion. "I don't know what to say." "You don't have to," Daniel said. "You already said the hard part." Over the following weeks, the restaurant transformed. Not just in appearance, but in rhythm, the kind of rhythm that happens when people actually want to be there. New hires were trained by veterans who finally had a reason to care. Jenna led with fairness, not fear. Staff meetings became problem-solving sessions, not scoldings. And the food improved. Because everything tastes different when you're not cooking under stress. Customers noticed. Word spread. The Fort Smith location was no longer the one to avoid. It became the flagship again. One afternoon, Daniel was doing paperwork in the office when a teenage dishwasher knocked on the door. Theo, quiet kid, hard-working, always stayed late to finish without being asked. "Mr. Whitmore." "Yeah." "My mom used to work for you at the Tulsa spot. Said you helped her out when my brother got sick. Gave her time off, paid her anyway." Daniel looked up. "She always said you were different." Daniel leaned back, surprised but not entirely. "What's your last name?" "Ramsey." Daniel nodded slowly. "Tell her I remember her, and tell her her kid's doing excellent work." Theo grinned like he just won something. That night, Daniel stayed late. Everyone else was gone. The only sounds were the low hum of the refrigerator and the soft buzz of the exit signs overhead. He sat at a booth with a plate of grits Jenna had made for him earlier. No fancy presentation, just hot grits, 2 pieces of toast, and butter melting in the center. He took a bite, sat back, looked around. This was never just about steak. It was about people, the overlooked, the silenced, the ones who show up anyway. People like Jenna, like Theo, like the woman who worked double shift with no childcare and never complained. Like the cook who showed up with a brace on his wrist because he couldn't afford to take a day off. Daniel wasn't trying to save the restaurant industry. He was trying to save what little integrity was left in it, and maybe rebuild the kind of place where folks didn't have to whisper to be heard. If you've ever worked under someone who abused their power, or if you've been the one afraid to speak, let this story be a reminder. Change doesn't start with a title. It starts with courage. Speak up, show up, and support the people who risk everything to do the right thing.